Indoor baseball, as softball was initially called, was first played in 1887 in the Farragut Club in the United States. Basketball proved to be the more practical indoor game, forcing the sport outside, which of course necessitated a name change. They first tried kitten ball, mush ball, and finally they lit on softball. In Nova Scotia, the evidence I've been able to find is that softball was first played in 1919 in the Stellarton Rink. That spring, it too went outdoors. In early Nova Scotian softball, a catcher wore the only mitt allowed. When maritime champions, the Stellarton Monarchs, went to Boston in the late 30s, they saw their first whip pitch and their first fielding gloves. But it was a good many years before they were common sights at home. Who's representing Fred Cuvelier? I'm sorry, I don't have it, Ben. Do you know?
Mr. Jim Cubelier.
Please come forward.
Jimmy?
Jim, if you'd come up and sit down in this chair here, we'd appreciate it. This is Fred's brother, Jim, who also played softball very well. Fred Cuvelier played in the 40s and 50s. He was an adept fielder, an outstanding hitter. It was his pitching, however, which has led to this nomination. When he pitched, it was not uncommon to see 4,000 fans flock to the Halifax Commons. Those fans would see a 9-inning game in which the catcher and the first baseman wore the only gloves. Remember, it's before television in Nova Scotia. The mound was 40 feet from home instead of the present day 45 feet. Cuvelier did not throw the whip pitch, though some Nova Scotians were starting to use it. Whip pitch or not, he was the fastest pitcher of his era, and he was an excellent change of pace, which would have batters swinging from their heels at pitches which dropped so fast that on occasion they didn't even reach home plate. Many said Cuvelier pitched in an uncanny fashion because of the misshapen fingers in his pitching hand. It had been crushed in a washing machine wringer when he was a kid. It's far more likely that his prowess was based on the speed of his fastball and the wonderful control he had. His records are lost in part undoubtedly because his very modesty didn't put much import in keeping up with such things. Thank goodness for collectors like his hard-hitting teammate Ed Mitchell, who has the nicest looking scrapbook I have ever seen. His contemporaries agree Fred Cuvelier pitched many 1, 2, and 3-hit ball games. These and the dozen or so no-hitters he pitched are extraordinary feats when you realize, at least in the beginning of his career, his fielders didn't wear cleats nor gloves, and the games lasted 9 innings rather than the present-day 7. In the 40s, Cuvelier pitched Zwickers to 3 straight commercial league championships and then on to capture Nova Scotia Maritime Senior A titles as well. Actually, though they were the same players, they were sponsored by Keith's after 1948. In the 48 season, Fred pitched almost all the games, led his team with a .985 fielding percentage, batted .304 in the 26-game regular season, and then batted in 2 runs in the 9th inning of the championship game. Not a bad season. For Keith's in 49, he batted .351 during the regular season, .330 in the playoffs, and in the final, he struck out 12 and walked 1. Frank Neely met Fred when they were kids. He remembers well the 40 years he and Fred were buddies. They hunted and fished together, played ball together, played in a band together where Fred played the banjo and Frank the guitar. He remembers, too, joining the Army in 1951, only to spend the next 2 summers being flown around in big bombers to Newfoundland, Quebec, PEI, and many other places around Canada. Not a bad way to serve your country. Cuvelier played for Olands from 53 through 57. He pitched in the 3 consecutive Maritime Championships. Records do show that he won 12 straight playoff games in this period. The sponsorship came as no accident either. Fred was a chauffeur for the Olands family. Bruce Oland, who looks back at 40 years of friendship, attended many of the games. He remembers Fred Cuvelier as a man who combined a fierce competitiveness with an ability to take losses without being upset. A man who, despite a keen interest in those around him, never said an unkind word about any of them. Fred was a man, say his friends, whose eyes always sparkled. Fred Cuvelier seemed to combine explosiveness with endurance. It was not unusual for him to pitch 3 games in 4 nights during a playoff stretch. A large part of any endurance performance, of course, is the willingness of the performer to withstand pain or discomfort where others would not. On a Quebec road trip, Cuvelier pushed himself so hard, he actually collapsed 3 times while on the mound. Many of you have heard of, if you've not actually seen, a novelty 4-man softball team called the King and His Court. The pitcher of the team is the world-famous Eddie Feigner. After one of their many trips through Nova Scotia, pressure was put on Fred to put together a Nova Scotian version. He did, and they became known as the Olands 4-man team. Fred picked up Barbara Forbes, Irv Lucas, Frank Croucher, and Frank Neely, all great players in their own right. 3 of them would start with Fred, the 4th would substitute, but there'd never be more than 4 players on the field. Fred's unbelievable superiority from the mound allowed them to compete seriously with senior teams from around the province. His versatility as an athlete was demonstrated when, among other things, he delighted onlookers with his lightning pick-off move to first base, which he performed by throwing the ball behind his back. He'd rack up strikeouts while playing blindfolded or pitching from second base. In addition to the pitching tricks, when they got well in front, they delight the crowd with antics like running straight from first to third when their opponents were trying for a force out at second base. Or the base runner would run the first 3 bases normally, then turn around, run right back across the mound to first base, and do it all over again. 2 members of this great 4-man phenomenon are still alive. I believe, although I'm not sure, that Frank Neely and Frank Croucher are here tonight. If they are, would they please stand? Of course, the inevitable occurred when Eddie Feigner came through in his annual summer tour. The Olands team took them on. When the game had ended, the dust settled, the crowd had been entertained royally, though the King and His Court won the game 3-1. One season, when a power-laden St. John Dry Dock club had beaten Cuvelier's senior team in the Maritime Championships, a game was arranged between the new champions and the Olands 4-man. Fred Cuvelier and his 4-man team beat the Maritime champions to take a bit of the wind out of their sails. Al Josie remembers a story which probably depicts the Cuvelier legend in a way that would make Fred happy. It seems a batter stood like a statue one time when one of Fred's fastballs blew by him for a call 3rd strike. As the story goes, he turned and said, "Hey, ump, I heard that pitch and it sounded low." Ladies and gentlemen, Fred Cuvelier never took himself nor his athletic prowess nearly as seriously as we're taking both tonight. Despite his wishes, it's a pleasure to present to you for induction to the Nova Scotia Sport Heritage Centre Hall of Fame, one of the finest athletes ever to play in the province, Mr. Fred Cuvelier.
Go walk off the edge there, Jimmy. We'll get up here. Is Winnie Horton with us? Winnie Horton, the new chairman of the selection committee for the Valley, is unfortunately not able to be with us. I would like at this time to call upon Mr. Tom Lynch of the Sports Heritage Board of Directors to come forward and make the presentation to Jim Cubelier. Tommy?
Congratulations, Jim. It's just excellent. It's a great story. Congratulations.
Thank you, Tom. You know, somehow we don't want you to get lost in this whole scenario, because Jimmy Cubelier, you should know, was a pretty fair country ball player himself. And you played how many years with Fred?
Oh, about 15, something like that.
You were an infielder?
I was an infielder, yeah.
Never tried pitching?
No thanks.
Okay, Freddie was just, those of us who knew him, to know him was to love him, because he was just such a blithe spirit and a happy-go-lucky guy who really never took himself too seriously, but certainly took his job seriously, and that was getting the batters out.
Well, he was serious in some ways. You know, I remember one time I walked into him, he had a little wild spell going, and I said, Fred, why don't you let them hit it? I'm behind you. He says, that's what I'm afraid of. You know. And he had his moments.
There are those who will say that he did some of his finest pitching in his four-man days. Would you subscribe to that, or was he a superior pitcher in the conventional game?
Well, to tell you the truth, Pat, I never seen him pitch in the four-man team. Those were weekend jaunts they used to have, and of course, me being married, I had to stay home. But, well, from what I've heard, he did very well at it. That's all I can say.
He certainly did. He took on the best in the world in the four-man business, and it's nice to see Frank Croucher, his old catcher here tonight, and Frankie Neely, his buddy. And members of your family are here.
Oh, members of our family are all here, yes.
And I think they should stand, please. Members of the Cubelier family who are here tonight to celebrate Freddie's induction into the hall. Please stand and be recognized. There you are. I spot some athletes out there.
Don't forget Ed Mitchell. Eddie Mitchell.
Carrying a lot of these people who just stood up are carrying on in the great athletic tradition of the Cubeliers.
Some of them. Yeah. But we still have another one who I'd like for to stand up, if you don't mind, Pat. Is sure. Ed Mitchell.
Ed Mitchell, where are you, Eddie? Eddie in his legend in his own right. Where's Ed Mitchell?
Way in the back, Pat.
Way at the back? Great to see you, Ed. It's a great moment for you, too. Okay, thanks very much, Jim. Once again, congratulations.
Thank you, Pat.
Jimmy Cubelier, ladies and gentlemen.